That's today's. That'll be today's sermon. Huh? 107, lesson 107. What keeps going on with my screen? There it is. So what is blasphemy? It ain't good. Huh? That's a good start. Deliberate contempt for God. Only deliberate? Deliberate's the worst.
Well, when I was back in the Dark Ages, when I was people always said, "Oh my gosh." Now I hear everybody saying, "Oh my God," but I don't think they realize what they're saying. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. My opinion only. I don't think they realize that they're saying that against God.
Okay. So, what Judy says is, would people say it by accident? They don't know they're saying it against God. Is it really blasphemy? So let's take that logic into human perspective. If you're driving from here to Indiana, do you know the speed limit on every single road?
No, you don't. I can't.
So if you're driving from here to Chicago, do you know the speed limit on every road you're going to travel from here to Chicago? Okay, so if you're going from here to Grand Island, Nebraska, do you know the speed limit on every road you're going to travel? So if you're caught on that road going over the speed limit, does that excuse of not knowing still get you free? Be like, oh, I'm sorry, officer, I didn't know it was 55 when I was doing 80. Okay, and Ed says that's what the sign's for. What sign do we have to know that that phrase is blasphemy? The whole Bible. The lack of knowledge does not provide excuse, is my point. Just because you don't know it's a crime, if you commit it, you still go to jail. You still pay the consequences.
But they don't know any better.
Neither does the guy that's speeding on a road he doesn't know. There is. I believe one's worse than the other, but I don't believe it frees you from all guilt.
I had one incident. We were in Florida, and I would say this doorway was 55 miles an hour to the wall up there, the school zone. I'm towing a trailer. Well, I didn't stop right away,
Yep.
And when the police pulled me over, I said, "You see, I'm from Pennsylvania. There's the 55. There's the school zone. Do you want me to jackknife?" He just said, "Be careful."
Yeah, be careful moving forward.
Yeah.
You don't. But blasphemy is definitely intentional, but I don't think it frees you of all guilt when you just don't know any better either. Same when we talked about, 6 weeks ago, and we talked about yoga. Yoga is demon worship. So just because you don't know you're doing it as demon worship, I don't believe relieves you from it. Because we're not ignorant people. We can find this stuff out if we want to.
I got a 2-year-old grandkid that I correct come in and say, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
2 years old.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I don't know. I work with 50, 60, 70-year-olds that still haven't outgrown it.
Well, then it's up to you to try to.
I do, but the next day, or, the next sentence, it's the same thing.
Next 5 minutes, they're going still.
But yes, it is. We'll get into it more in our lesson. New memory verse. Does anybody know the new one? You got to throw it under the bus, Judy.
You say it first.
I don't know it.
You're so used to your mom saying it, I don't even look at it.
Now you're throwing yourself under the bus. All right, it's therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show you mercy. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are those who wait for him. Isaiah 30:18. So that leads me to, if he's a God of justice, how can he just overlook people blaspheming his name? I'm not very good with the ignorance plea. We don't know any better. Well, in that case, then Israel throughout the Old Testament is blameless.
No,
Because they just didn't know any better.
no, I'm talking about today's kids.
But those were kids too that didn't know any better. They thought worshiping Baal and sacrificing babies on altars was normal. That'd be terrible. But in their culture, it was normal. In the world at that time, it was normal.
But why have a baby if you're going to burn it?
I don't know. That's a good question, but I can't answer that. But God didn't hold them blameless. He sent them into exile
Well, I'm sorry I brought it up.
because they should know better. And we should. My only problem with the whole not knowing, because then if you want to test a theory, you take it to the furthest point you can and see if it holds true. So if you take it to the fullest extent, that means not knowing that Jesus is a Savior, does that get you into heaven? The lack of knowledge? No. If you're not redeemed by his blood, it doesn't matter if you never heard his name. You're condemned. So the lack of knowledge doesn't get you off there. The lack of knowledge probably doesn't get you off elsewhere. Especially our generation, because we have everything at our fingertips. It's not hard to find out. It takes like 2 seconds.
These kids are growing up without their parents going to church.
Okay, so now we can point blame at the parents and the grandparents. We're a couple generations in now.
I think it's great that we have the young people we do.
It is. All right, so we'll get into our lesson. We'll probably take extra time in Daniel because Daniel is one of my favorite books. But let's start with the recap. Anybody remember when the Exodus was? Years, time-wise. 1491 BC. How long did they wander the desert? 40 years. After that, they got to enter the promised land. In 10 words or less, can anybody describe to me the book of Judges? I think it's the last verse. At that time, everybody did what was right in their own eyes. So it was just obedience, rebellion, obedience, rebellion. So, after the people rejected God, what did they ask for? After Judges. So that they could be like every other nation. They wanted a king. First king was Saul. Second king, David. No, Jay's come later. Not Daniel, David. Third king, David's son. The wisest man to ever live. Solomon. And that was the end of the unified Israel. Then it breaks into the northern and southern kingdom. How can you describe the northern kingdom? They have any good kings? Not a one. They went into exile, what, 720, 721 BC? Kingdom of Judah. Any good kings? Yeah, they had a couple. They lasted a little longer. 607. 607 BC, they get taken into exile in the first wave of the Babylon conquest. Yes, 607 is the beginning of the fall of Judah. That's the first attack of Babylon. We went over the last few weeks. How many waves? 3. Babylon attacks in 3 waves. How long are they going to be in exile? 70 years. There's that 70. So the next few lessons, we'll look at the period of their captivity. Then we'll look at the period of their restoration. So you remember last week, the Babylonian king conquers Judah. He sent all but the poorest Israelites into captivity, left the poor there to be workers. He also selects young men to be taken and trained to serve the king. Daniel was one of the captives carried away during the first phase of captivity under King, anybody remember his name? Nebuchadnezzar. So let's start out in Daniel. I'll read the first 16 verses. Daniel chapter 1. Here's your J, Judy. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literatures and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned to them a daily portion of food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among those were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belshazzar. Hannah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear the Lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. And why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward, from whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. So what phase of captivity are we in now? First phase. How did Jehoiakim come to be conquered by Nebuchadnezzar? Verse 2. And the Lord, God, gave Nebuchadnezzar the victory over Jehoiakim. What 3 words are used as synonyms for the culture where they're taken into captivity? Because you'll see them throughout Daniel. They all mean the same thing. Anybody know any of them? Babylon, Shinar, and the Chaldeans. All the same thing. And they're all in these first few verses. Verses 1, 2, and 4, I think. So how were the young men selected from among the captives to serve the king? Smart, good looking?
Why did they stress that they had to be
Yeah. If you want advisors to the king, you would only want intelligent people.
But God would give them the wisdom.
They didn't believe in Daniel's and Shadrach and Meshach's God, so they needed human intelligence, is what Nebuchadnezzar looks for. He does, but Nebuchadnezzar doesn't know that yet. So he wants good looking, good complexion, and good brain. And healthy. No defects. What was to be done to the young men in the king's court? Good way to put it. Going to indoctrinate them. Yep, they're going to teach them everything about the Chaldeans, their language, their religion, their history, their hierarchy. Forget about the God you served, because obviously our God's bigger. We won the fight. So you're going to come and learn about our God. What was their source of food and provision? Yeah. Yeah. They get fed from the king's table, though, which is fairly generous of the king. Can't knock them. They are getting the best food in all of Babylon as their food. The best wine in all of Babylon as their drink. They are drinking the very same food and drinking the same wine as the king has. Hard to snub your nose up at that. The best of the best was your every meal. Not if used properly. Wine won't deaden your brain. I mean, you can have a glass of wine a day and it's never going to have, they say it has healthy side effects. I don't know. I can't get past the taste.
But if they were sitting around a table eating all that rich food, they're going to have quite a few.
They will have quite a few wines, but, well, I don't know about Babylonian wine, so I shouldn't say that. Jewish wine is really, really watered down by our standard. Yeah. By our standard of alcohol content, Jewish wine was nothing. Most Jewish wine, you'd get a stomach ache before you get a buzz. Because now we shoot for alcohol content. We shoot for the sole purpose of getting drunk. They had wine in all their drink because it kills bacteria. Makes the water clean to drink. Yeah, the water wasn't real good, so you have enough alcohol in there to kill the bacteria. But to get drunk off of just regular Jewish wine, you had to work at it.
I don't think that they would have wanted to get drunk.
Yeah, these four definitely not. They wouldn't have wanted to get drunk. But, as we'll learn today, God doesn't have anything against wine. In fact, it's his first miracle we'll study today. He creates it. Thou shalt not get drunk, not drink. Problem is a lot of us have trouble finding that line. Who was to take care of the young men? Ashpenaz. Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch. Do we have to deal with eunuch? In the old world, there's two different types of eunuchs. Castrated men or devoted men. Most people think the Babylonians was castrated men. I don't know that I do, but it's irrelevant to the story. What group did the four young mentioned in verse 6 belong to? I think I heard you. Judah. They were Judah. Yep. What happens to their names? Why does he change them? Great question. What does the name Daniel mean? It's God. It starts with God. Yep. God is my judge. That's the meaning of the name Daniel. His name gets changed to Belshazzar. What's Belshazzar mean? Bel, which is a false god, it's their chief god. It says, it means Bel, protect the king. What about, what's the next one? Hananiah. Anybody know what Hananiah means? God is gracious. His name gets changed to Shadrach. What's Shadrach mean? Aspired of Aku, the moon god. Next, Mishael. Mishael, anybody know what it means? Who is like God. They change his name to Meshach, which means who is like Aku. Again, the moon god. And then you have Azariah, which means God has helped, changed to Abednego, which means servant of Nabu. And Nabu was their god of wisdom. So in changing their names, they're pulling their identity in the Jewish God and putting it in the Babylonian gods. They want to remove all of the Jewishness from them. Because then they can't rebel. See, if you can assimilate everybody into your culture, you don't have large groups to fight against you. So what was Daniel's objection to the food that they offered him? Too rich? What else? It would defile them. It was against God's law for the Jewish people to eat such things. Pork and seafood. And they were still under the Jewish dietary laws. And, somebody said it earlier, they know that much of the meat on that table was sacrificed to who? The Babylonian gods. So what does Daniel request of Ashpenaz? Be allowed not to eat it and take vegetable and water. No, but we'll deal with that. A lot of people pull that from here, but it's wrong. And we'll get into that in a bit, but they do. They pull that vegetarian diet's more healthy for you and it's biblical. Jews were allowed to eat meat. Jews were allowed to eat a lot of things. Daniel's the one that went straight to vegetables because all the meat there was sacrificed to idols and he didn't want to take parts in any of it. But it's not what makes them healthier. But what is the result after 10 days? They're healthier. Better complexion, healthier, quicker. Quick-witted? I'm very quick-witted. I eat no vegetables.
Or were they used to eat vegetables before they were taken?
No, they would have eaten, lamb, all the stuff Jewish people.
Their family was eating daily.
But none of that was sacrificed to false gods. Their whole distancing was so they wouldn't defile themselves and break God's commandment. Who here would do the same thing?
These men were young,
16 probably?
so they could have been easily
easily led to do it, yes? Yeah. Well, show of hands. You get offered the finest food in all of America to eat it every single meal. Who here says no? I'm not going to say no. Most of us are not going to say no. But Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach believed in God so much they wouldn't defile themselves. For us, food's not an issue. You know, there's not unclean foods for us to eat. We weren't under Jewish dietary laws, but
Do you have any idea when, if back then, they have the kosher, like the kosher kitchens? That's where
yes.
everything is separate.
Yeah. Yeah, all those laws come from back then and rules come from back then. Separate, has to be prepared, has to be killed a certain way. You know, they had a whole bunch of regulations they had to follow. Jewish people still today have it. That's why you can go to the store and buy kosher salt. Because it is made. Yeah, Leviticus. Yeah. So let me ask you this. The Bible tells us those 4 were better looking than everybody else. Do you think Nebuchadnezzar only took 4 Jewish young boys into captivity? No. So that tells you the other ones ate what? They ate the best food at the table. You know? I'm not going to, because if I tell the king no, he'll just cut my head off. You're dead. But Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were willing to die rather than defile themselves. That's usually what makes the difference. So in essence, the Babylonians were seeking to brainwash the best and brightest of the Jews they'd taken into captivity. They wished to turn them from the loyalty to God of their former nation and call them to serve the gods of Babylon. And what teenager wouldn't love to eat all the best food in the kingdom? I remember my boys when they were this age. It didn't even have to be good food. They just ate everything. They'd eat out of house and home. You'd catch them eating a box of croutons or something. They don't even like salad. They're just out there with their hand in a box of croutons. But these boys ate vegetables, which most teenage boys absolutely hate, instead of eating the finest food in the land. What? I sat at that table for like 8 hours and refused to eat them because I could not stand cooked vegetables. Still don't like most cooked vegetables. So, to Dottie's question, does this mean that a vegetarian diet will make you healthier than any other diet? No. What made them healthier? God, because of their obedience. God blesses their obedience, not the food they're taking in. Yeah, people love to pull certain little sections out without actually reading the whole thing. But because in the contrary, you know, so God gonna bless me if I eat McDonald's for every single meal? He's gonna bless me with cholesterol and a heart attack. You know, eat healthy or not eat healthy. Their blessing comes from God, not from their food. God blessed Daniel and those who chose to face the possibility of a death sentence to be obedient to his rule. So this account should draw us to look at what God accomplishes and not what we can accomplish. If I go in front of a king and say, no, I'm not going to eat your food, what's going to happen to me? I'm dead, unless God intervenes. And God intervenes. If you read Daniel chapter 1, He gives Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, favor. Gives Daniel favor with him. The chef, he gives Daniel favor with. He changes the hearts of people that aren't even his to bless the ones who are obedient. So what attributes of God did Daniel rightly understood as he stood up to the king's defiling demands? He knew God was sovereign. He didn't fear the king, he feared God. The king could do nothing. I mean, verse 3 or whatever we just talked about. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. So he knew that God was sovereign. The king is just a man. If I'm going to offend one, it's not going to be God. He also knew that God was holy, loving, immutable, faithful to all that follow him. Does that mean you'll never face trouble? Nope. Just the opposite most of the time. Even death. I probably will be astounded in heaven at how many people were killed just so 35 people would come to Christ from their death. They never got to see it. They never got to figure out what the blessing was of them being tortured and killed to death. But they'll find out when they get to heaven and say, because of your sacrifice, Christ called me. So God is faithful and sovereign, and Daniel knew that. He was willing to honor God by refusing the defiling effects of the king's food. He trusted the outcome to God's plan. That is something we could take heart with. We're a generation, well, we're probably several generations that want to know the outcome before we take the first step. We want to have all the answers before we do anything. I'm going to figure it all out and then I'll start. God does not work that way. God says, do it, take the first step. But it's impossible. I didn't ask you whether it was possible. I told you to do it. But it's scary. I didn't ask you if it was scary. Just do it. Take the first step. Daniel has a faith that is worth imitating. Here's a little thing, food. It's not really that little because it's a life or death thing for him, but it's food. Take it outside of the king of Nebuchadnezzar and all that. Daniel is obedient in the smallest of things. He's not going to break any of God's laws on purpose. We all think we can be so faithful in these big things. We did this in men's Bible study. I think I picked on Larry. But, you know, if God called you to move tomorrow, sell everything you own, give the money away, and head to Mexico. Who's doing it? And everybody's like, yeah, I'll do it. And then I use swearing, because swearing's an easy one to pick men on, because we all tend to swear. So the Bible says you'll be judged for every idle word that proceeds from your lips. When was the last time you said a swear word? Well, today. You can't obey this little thing, but you're going to tell me you're going to obey this big one. This is a simple one. Don't cuss. You'll be judged for every idle word. Don't speak negatively about anybody. That's a simple one. None of us obey it. Don't gossip. Don't envy. Simple ones. But we think we can obey this big one. You know, the mountain that you got to climb instead of the tiny step. The only way you climb the mountain is if you're obedient in the small steps. Practice the little things first. Learn to be obedient in them. Then the bigger ones come easier. Today, we have an advantage of the Holy Spirit dwelling inside us. That usually when we do that thing we're not supposed to, there's this alarm that goes off in our heads, but we just do it anyhow. If we just listen to the alarm and don't do it, it's easier. So the next question they have here that we'll finish with, if you wanted to lose weight, would you follow the diet plan of Daniel? No. I certainly won't. I ain't eat vegetables. That's still pushing it. I won't eat it with my meat most of the time. I am not a vegetable person. I I am not. I like them raw. I'll eat them all raw, except mushrooms.
57 years.
Yeah, nope. But no, I'm meat and potato. I'll eat potato in every form and fashion. Any questions? So I told you we'll be stuck in Daniel a lot longer than they're allotting, because there is a lot in Daniel, especially once we get into the later chapters. Yeah, we'll finish this one up next. Well, we'll continue on this one next week. Yeah. How long do we spend in Daniel and men's Bible study? Months and months and months. All right, Pops, close us in prayer.